Hi, this is Jack at Jack's Transmissions, and you guys need to stop cleaning your GR6 Nissan GT-R valve bodies. You are ruining your valve bodies. So this is going to be kind of a long video, but I want to explain why taking these apart and cleaning them is doing nothing for your problem that you have with your trans, and you're making your situation far worse by taking them apart and cleaning them. So join me in this video. We're going to talk about several things. One is why it's better to fix your valve body rather than rebuild or tear it apart and clean it. Just a simple repair will do a lot more good for you. And why having us rebuild them is a better option for you. Because not only do we have the proper equipment and experience, but we also are going to charge you less than it would cost you if you would have done it yourself. So stick with us here. Let's discuss the valve body issue. Okay, so I have a little sheet here where I've listed various concerns when it comes to a valve body repair right here versus tearing the whole thing down and doing a complete cleaning and rebuild of the valve body. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go down the list here, and I'm going to highlight the advantage side of each part of the list here, and we'll take a look at the total to see what makes the most sense here when it comes to dealing with your valve body. So first we have the left side here, which is what I like to call the fix repair. So this is when you have a problem and you end up replacing like 1, 2, or 3 components, as few components as possible to repair the unit versus a full tear down, rebuild, and cleaning. So as the customer, which one of these options is the best option? I always try to, when people contact me about issues with their GR6 or valve body that want to repair it themselves, I always try to have them do a repair and not a full tear down and cleaning. And there's good reason for that. So let's go down the list here. So the first one is a fix repair is going to be a lot less expensive. When repairing only, one sensor, one solenoid, or a couple, it's not going to cost you very much money. You replace the part, put the machine back into service, and you're good to go. When you're doing a complete tear down with a cleaning, you're going to have to replace O-rings, gaskets. You're probably going to replace all the solenoids, and it's going to take a lot of time as well. So this is going to be far more expensive than just what is called a fixed repair. So we'll go ahead and give a win on inexpensive here when it comes to a fixed repair versus a complete tear down and cleaning. So we go down to the next one here. So obviously there's going to be less time spent when you do a fixed repair versus tearing the full thing down, cleaning everything out, replacing all the parts, and putting it back together. So there's another win here on time, especially if you're a vendor or a shop. Time is money. You don't want to spend like 2-3 days rebuilding a valve body for a customer. So we'll give a win on that one. So the next in line here for the fixed repair is minimally invasive. So when you're replacing one part, it's probably going to be a solenoid or sensor that's screwed into the top of the valve body. You simply pull that out, replace that part, and put it back together. That's it. It's super simple. It's very difficult to make a mistake doing that. You go over here, if you're going to tear the whole valve body apart, you're going to disrupt gaskets. You're going to be pulling the harness out, which has several areas that are clearance pretty tight where you risk damaging the harness or sensors while pulling it. And then you also have like valves, the case itself, where if you don't put it back together correctly, you're going to damage the case and things will get warped, so valves will stick. And aftermarket seals for the valve body are awful. They're far worse than OEM. OEM, like O-ring seals, when it comes to the shift selector solenoids or any part of the valve body, are far superior than anything aftermarket. If you replace all of your O-ring seals in your valve body with an aftermarket O-ring seal, it will compress and it will begin to rot in time. And then you'll have another problem in the future involving pressure leaks due to aftermarket seals. So keeping the unit as OEM as possible and keeping it simple by being minimally invasive is really the best bet on this end. So we're going to give another win here to fixed repair versus the full teardown. Go down next on the list. When we do a fixed repair and you're replacing only a couple of components, it's easy to backtrack. So let's say you're getting a code for shift fork C, solenoid for shift fork C. You replace the solenoid for shift fork C, and then you put the trans back in the car, and now you got a code for circuit shift fork C and shift fork C blocked. You have all these other codes stacked on top of what you just did. It's easy to go back and be like, okay, I touched this solenoid, I touched this part of the trans, and it didn't work. You can revert back and go back to your original condition without having to try to figure out what's going on. And so we go over here to full tear down and build. You go ahead and put it all back together, and you have a new series of codes, which happens a lot, by the way, with the do-it-yourselfer that does this. What is it? What did you do? It's really hard to backtrack and find where you made your mistake. It could be anything, especially if you're the type of person that replaced everything in the valve body, all of the solenoids, gaskets, seals, you had it all completely torn apart, put it back together. Where did you make your mistake? It is nearly impossible to backtrack and figure out where you went wrong. So another win here for fixed repair. Next is, if you're a shop and you want to learn about the GR6 and do simple repairs, at your shop, you begin to learn patterns. So you'll learn that most solenoid codes, when it comes to this platform, has nothing to do with a solenoid. It's either a blown seal or a pressure sensor problem. And by doing one part at a time, you learn these things. So let's say you're having a clutch solenoid code, and you replace the clutch solenoid, it doesn't fix it. So you put the OEM solenoid back in, and then you come and talk to me, and then I say, no, that's not a solenoid, that's a pressure sensor problem, replace the pressure sensors. You get the pressure sensors from me, you put them in there, and it fixes it. So now you know that solenoid code is actually more likely to be a pressure sensor. So you learn that pattern. So now if a customer calls you, and you're like, hey, I got this code, and it only happens when the trans hits 180 degrees temp or higher. Oh, that's pressure sensor. You just learned that pattern, and it's a very common pattern. Over here, when you shoot a bunch of parts at it, I call that shotgunning. So, you're basically just pointing a gun at your valve body, and you're just spraying a bunch of material at it, hoping that you're going to find the problem. And by doing that, if you do get lucky and you do fix it by, just throwing a bunch of parts at it, what fixed it? You don't know what fixed it. It could be anything. So you didn't learn anything by doing this. So I'm going to have to give another one here to learn patterns. So, for somebody who is just a do-it-yourselfer, who you want to fix your own trans and you don't care about learning anything, you just want it fixed, this may be the better option for you. But I tell you, at the end of the day, whether you're doing it or another shop is doing it, learning why things happen just makes things a lot easier and understanding the platform, how everything works and what you're involved with. So the next line here is the fixed repair. It takes experience, and you have experience right here at your fingertips with me. You email me with a code, logs, and an explanation of what's going on. I could use my experience to help you repair the problem without making things worse. Over here on this side, if you tear everything down and just, again, you just shotgun it and just replace all of the parts in the valve body, replace everything, and, it works, then, you fixed it, I guess. As far as the do-it-yourself is concerned, this is the better option here because if you throw a bunch of parts at it and it works, you don't care. Over here, it takes experience. And most of the people I'm dealing with in part sales don't have this. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to give the full teardown, rebuild, and cleaning a green on this one because it's, fixing an issue that's hard to find. It happens with me too. Sometimes you just got to throw parts at it until it works. And then, with me, I try to backtrack from there to figure out, okay, what made this work so I can learn from it to get my experience. But with most people that I deal with, you don't have the experience, so the best option might be just to throw parts at it. So we go over here to the next one. So, doing a fixed repair, you're leaving parts behind for future failure. So if you're only replacing a couple of parts, you may have other parts that are worn out and are going to fail in the near future. So I could definitely see this as a potential concern when it comes to doing a fixed repair versus the whole thing. When you replace all the parts and do the entire thing, you're starting with a clean slate. You have everything brand new, it's all good, it's all clean, it's all been checked. So, I'm going to have to give clean slate the thumbs up on this one. So we work on to the next one. So fixed repair preserves OE parts. Now, what's interesting about this is OE parts are pretty important to keep in these transmissions. They're pretty sensitive. So a lot of people out there sell parts for the GR6 that are not from the GR6. They're actually from the DSG family of transmissions. And the parts are also, they may be made in China and are clones of the OEMs. So by replacing all of the parts in your transmission, just blindly shotgunning it and just throwing a bunch of stuff at it, you are very likely installing inferior parts that are not OE and are not the same quality and are not going to work correctly. Things like the springs in the line solenoid are actually slightly different, even though it looks the same as OE. And it's the same with the shift selector solenoids. They're made out of inferior materials. You're replacing the known good high quality solenoids in your transmission with inferior parts. So this is a tough one, but I would like to preserve OE parts, and we've actually streamlined our process here, where instead of replacing solenoids in all of our rebuilds, we actually rebuild the OE solenoids, and I'll talk more about this later. So on a fixed repair, you're not tearing it completely down to clean it internally. There are internal filters that people gripe about in these units, that have to be cleaned according to them. And by doing a fixed repair, you're not going through that. You're not cleaning the unit. It's still dirty. Over here, obviously, if you tear the unit completely down and clean it, it's clean, right? Well, maybe not. So let's discuss that a little bit more and see why I feel this way. But depending on which route you're going here, I would say as the do-it-yourselfer or a shop that's learning about these, it is better not to clean the valve body. Very adamant about that. So next we have on the list here, minimal equipment. Or do you need specialized equipment? So fixed repair, you don't need fancy equipment. I tell you which parts you need to replace. You order those parts, swap them in there, you're good to go. You don't need any special equipment. You don't need anything special to clean it. You don't need any kind of acids or anything to clear out the valve body and clean everything properly. The equipment that you're using, you don't need test equipment, any of that stuff. It makes it super simple. So you don't need specialized equipment. You just replace the part and go. Over here, when you're doing all of this, you need specialized equipment. You have to triple check everything and make sure that the solenoids, the pressures in the valve body, all of that stuff is working perfectly and is rebuilt properly. When we rebuild the solenoids, we're using specialized equipment that we designed and built in-house to assure that the solenoid is working properly and is OE. It's not some aftermarket unit. So, when it comes to the do-it-yourselfer, it's better to use minimal equipment because you don't have the equipment that we do. So again, fixed repair gets another plus for minimal equipment. So this brings us on to the last thing here. We have the equipment, we have the experience, we know the patterns, we know everything about these valve bodies. We do several a week. So for us, doing a full tear down and rebuild makes sense. We have the equipment to do it. Unfortunately, you don't. You don't have the equipment to properly run the solenoids, rebuild them properly, assemble them properly, and using aftermarket parts. You just don't know what you're dealing with here. So, when you go through the valve body and do a full tear down, clean, and shotgun parts at it, it's unknown if you fixed it. You could put it back in the car, have the same failure. Is it that valve body? Are you actually just working on the wrong thing? A common thing we see here is a lot of people would just do a fluid change on their GR6. They'll buy a fluid kit from us with the filters and everything. They'll pull the oil pan off, and then they'll pull the main selector valve body at the bottom of the trans and do all of these things to it. And then when they put it back together, it doesn't work. You had a perfectly working trans that just needed a fluid change, and now the selector valve body is ruined. So, as you can see here, the fixed repair easily wins here. This is an honest look at what's going on here. And if you're honest with yourself as to your capabilities, the equipment you have, and what you see online, just fixing your valve body, if you want to do it yourself, is the best way to go. Do not do a full tear down of the unit. It's going to create so many problems in the future, or even when you get it back together, it's just never going to work right. So we've been getting a huge number of valve bodies lately, and I've been trying to figure out what is going on. And it looks like it's from internet misinformation. So there are people showing how to test the solenoids, which is all wrong, and also people showing you how to tear them apart and clean them, because for some reason, cleaning a valve body will resolve all of your issues with your GR6. All of that is totally false. You can take your valve body apart and clean it all day long. It's not going to fix the solenoid code that you're getting. I've never taken a valve body apart and cleaned it and had it resolve any issue involving a selector valve body or a clutch valve body in this platform. It just does not work. But what it does do is it creates a whole series of new issues that you're going to have to chase involving the valve body that you just tore down and ruined. So, case in point, this valve body came in the other week. I ended up just rebuilding a core for this customer, but he bought an oil change kit from us, sump filter, line filter, gaskets, fluid, all of that stuff. And while he was in there doing that, he decided to pull the main selector valve body out and follow the videos online to clean it while he was doing his fluid change. And look at what happened. So he put it back together, and we have this right here. So obviously he didn't put it back together right. It had a pressure issue, and it blew out through the casting of the case. You had pressure just skyrocketed in this. And we watch the path here, the fluid path. Look at that. That is insane. I have never in my life seen this happen to a GR6 valve body. It's nuts. So he went horribly wrong on a rebuild here. And this was a perfectly functioning trans. It worked great, didn't have any problems. He was just doing a fluid change, and he thought he was doing the right thing by taking the selector valve body apart and cleaning it. Don't do that. This guy ended up having to spend so much more time and money, just all these headaches to try to fix it. Don't do it. This happens a lot when customers that are not familiar with these units try to clean the valve body via the misinformation online. The method of rebuild that a lot of people try to do is what I call shotgun. So it's when you just find all the solenoids you can online, all the gaskets, all the seals, and you just throw it at the valve body while you have it apart, hoping that it's going to fix your issue. Most of the time, it does not. And most of the time, the solenoids that you're getting for your GR6 are actually not from this platform. They're from the DSG, the Volkswagen. So this is a DSG valve body here. As you can see, selector solenoid, line pressure solenoid, even the clutch solenoids look exactly the same. But for example, the line pressure solenoid is not the same. And I get several emails a week from people that have rebuilt their valve body. They put it back in their car, and then they have low line pressure. It's just right off the red. And they're thinking their oil pump is bad. So they'll ask me for a replacement oil pump. They need an oil pump. Oil pumps never go bad in a GR6, ever. The only thing I've seen take out an oil pump in a GR6 is when you have a front clip failure with the trans and it's just shedding metal into the trans for thousands of miles. Eventually, all that metal gets to the pump, but even then, you can clean the pump up and it'll be fine. They just don't fail in this application. They're a very high volume, high quality pump. What really does happen is the solenoid that you put in there is not for the GR6. So the spring in the solenoid is incorrect for that application, and so your line pressure drops because the solenoid is not working properly. So, the spring in these solenoids, the stiffer the spring, higher your pressure, weaker the spring, lower the pressure. Now for a DSG, it needs a weaker spring to run the correct line pressure. The GR6 needs a stiffer spring. So if you just blindly replace your solenoids, you created another problem, which is a pressure problem, by putting a DSG solenoid in your GR6. So with every GR6 valve body that I rebuild, I actually rebuild the solenoids, the OE solenoids. I don't use the aftermarket stuff. So right here is your spring in question. So spring, and that's what applies pressure on this pulse width modulated solenoid. So look, this is where experience comes into play. I've been doing this for over 10 years. I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars just on this freaking line pressure solenoid. It killed us for years trying to figure out what happens with these. When these age, this tiny spring gets weak. And as the spring becomes weak, your line pressure goes down. So, how can you find a spring that's going to survive, that has the correct tension for the GR6 and will work properly in the GR6 and live under, the countless duty cycles that it's going to see? So, low line pressure in the GR6, and this is just one of infinite examples of problems with this platform, is people will have line pressure that's dropping due to a spring that's getting weak in the line pressure solenoid, and they think they need an oil pump. They think they need filters. They think they need to tear every valve body apart and replace all the filters in it because there's a filter plugged up somewhere that's causing a line issue. No, 9 times out of 10, it is a weak spring in your line solenoid. And if you order a new solenoid online, it's also going to be wrong. So if you replace the solenoid thinking that's wrong with one, you're on the right track, but you put the wrong one in there. So you're right back to the original issue you had. So it gets really tricky on this platform trying to figure out what is causing your low line pressure. Again, 9 times out of 10 is this guy. The solenoids that we carry, I can't get new solenoids for the GR6, from Borg Warner. I use the same solenoids everyone else does from the DSG platform. However, I take them apart and I replace them with the correct solenoid that took me over 10 years out and have it work consistently. So line pressure solenoids are just one of many things on this platform that took a lot of effort to figure out, and we know it really well, and that's why you should buy the parts from us over anything online. What you're getting is correct for this GR6 application. So I'm strongly against cleaning your valve body. And you're probably thinking to yourself, well, if I should keep the OE solenoids, I'll just clean my valve body and that's it and call it done. But the problem with doing that is there's another problem with these units that will create issues when it comes to cleaning your valve body. So, you got to think about how a GR6 operates. So you have, the clutch, which has this paper material that is, wearing off of the plates and mixing with the fluid. And then you have a constant mesh gear set that is slowly wearing and sending metal into the oil. So you have this mixture of old oil, paper material from the clutch and metal flakes in the trans fluid. And this stuff is electromagnetically attracted to things like solenoids and various valve body components. And you see this a lot on the shifting pistons in the valve body. You see all this metal that you have to clean off the shifting piston. Well, this is everywhere. This is coated everywhere in the trans. But when the stuff is in its like jelly fluid form, it's easy to get rid of it by just changing your oil. If you change your oil more frequently, or you do a couple of quick, changes of the fluid, it'll come off and it'll clean itself naturally. So the best way to look at this is at the clutch itself, because it's really good at, you can actually get more of a visual of it. This is the stuff I'm talking about right here. It's right now, you see it's soft and it comes off pretty easily, but it smears real bad. Look at that. So it's actually not very harmful, as it is right now. So if you change your fluid, this will naturally flush out and clean itself. I've had CBA transmissions with 80,000 plus miles come into my shop where the customer changed the oil too often and all this stuff was clean and clear. So changing the fluid often, prevents this from happening. And if you do have this, just change the fluid a few times, a little more often than you should, and it will naturally clean itself. Now, let's say you clean your valve body. Well, what's happening is that goo of, the mix of paper, metal, and old fluid, what you're doing is you're drying that out when you clean the valve body. And when you dry that material out, you get these hard chunks of essentially what is paper material with metal embedded in it, that's going to basically work its way loose into the trans, and that's what will clog your solenoids. So we go over here to this one. This has been cleaned. It's been run through the wash. Looks amazing, doesn't it? Well, it's not. It's deceiving. Again, I'm using this as an example because you can see it more clearly, but that right there is what I'm talking about. This stuff is hard. It's not as soft as it was before. So you got this stuff that's going to flake off, get into the ball valves of your solenoids, and damage stuff. This is why cleaning your valve body isn't going to work. It takes a special mix of chemicals to get all of this off properly. There are areas inside the solenoids and inside the valve body itself that you think you cleaned, but you didn't. And what you did is you created a time bomb of material that's going to end up working its way out and into everything else in the trans and cause more issues. Instead of taking your valve body apart and cleaning it, the simple solution is just change your fluid more often. It's that simple. So at the end of the day, with as much as we've done with this platform, we've actually built a lot of our own equipment to cycle solenoids, whether they're pulse width modulated or not. I know what they look like when I take them apart, whether there's bushing wear, pin wear, spring wear, all that stuff. I know what I'm looking for, and I know how to test it. I've made, little, test pieces of, bench test equipment that could check the spring rate of everything from your relief valve spring rate in your clutch valve body all the way to your line pressure spring. I can change these to increase your line pressure all the way through its range, or decrease it, or just have it like OEM. It took many years and a lot of time to figure this stuff out. And various issues with these valve bodies that have to do with the solenoid code is incorrect. The TCM doesn't know how to properly communicate some problems with these units. You can have a solenoid code and it could be something as simple as a pressure sensor or a blown clutch seal. With this platform, anytime somebody says they need a solenoid, I always immediately ask them, what's the issue? It's rarely a solenoid in a GR6. And that's where experience comes into play here. Experience, advanced equipment, and just doing so many of them. I spot things right away. So another advantage to having us rebuild your valve body than you doing it at home is its price. So since we actually stick to the OE parts on these and try not to use anything aftermarket, we don't have to buy a bunch of solenoids for your valve body. We've streamlined the process here very accurately to take your solenoid apart, your OE solenoid, refresh it properly, respring it, put it back together, and know that it's correct. So, you know, when it comes to the cost of if you're just going to shotgun everything and replace all the solenoids, you're going to end up actually spending more money rebuilding these valve bodies yourself by throwing so many new parts at it than we would here with our streamlined process of rebuilding the OE parts. So we only charge $800 per valve body to rebuild these. That's going through all the solenoids, through the whole thing, rebuilding it properly and testing it to make sure it's absolutely perfect. This is, you know, a lot of experience that, you know, in play here. You know, a lot of equipment that we've designed and built in-house to assure that it's perfect. And if we're dealing with a valve body that's a little questionable, like we didn't find a smoking gun to the issue, I'll test that valve body in our shop GT-R to make sure it is absolutely perfect. And, you know, I have two what I call Franken missions here. I have two complete GR6 transmissions that I use specifically for clutch, main selector, and you know, clutch valve body testing. So it's gotten to the point where I get so many valve bodies now, I had to sacrifice 2 cores for, you know, testing the units to make sure they're absolutely perfect before they leave. So by having us do it, it's going to cost you probably a lot less money, less time on your end lost on, you know, trying to tear it apart and figure out where everything goes. And on top of that, you know it's a functioning valve body when you get it from us. I'll have it in a bag like this. Here's one I just completed. It says right here, early CBA, DBA, in-car tested, good. OEM line sensor. So we know it's good to go. I send you a video of me driving my car, doing various series of tests to be sure that this valve body is perfect before I pull it. And another advantage is on my car, I have a late TCM and an early TCM. So no matter what year your valve body came from, I can put that TCM in my car and assure that your 2016 car, even though mine's a 2013, and I'm testing it as a 2016 car to be absolutely sure that valve body is functioning perfectly like it should. So it's the same with the clutch valve bodies too. Those are a bit more of a pain to get into, but that's why I have 2 cores that I sacrificed just for valve body testing. Is, you know, we could test everything. I could check the pressure sensors to see if they're thermally sensitive. I do a lot of thermal tests with these. So as the temperature heats up, you know, if the sensor is beginning to drift out of range, I'll see that and I'll know whether your pressure sensors are good or not. I'll know whether, you know, any of the solenoids are getting lazy or weak. I'll know if line pressures are perfectly on target. You know, I'll know all of that because I put the extra effort into testing it. So instead of taking it apart, spending more money and time yourself rebuilding the valve body and putting it back in and having more issues and not knowing if the issue is stemming from that valve body or something else, you know with us that when you get your valve bodies back, that they have been thoroughly tested, they've been, you know, the repair has been performed by experienced people here, and not only are you going to have less time and money cooped up into it, but you're also going to have, you know, a unit that's fully tested. You know that that is perfect. So when you put it in your car and you still have an issue with the trans, it's not those valve bodies. There's something else going on. But we're here to help. If you give us a code, any data logs, or any of the symptoms you're experiencing, you know, 99% of the time we know exactly what it is, and we can help, you know, push you into the right track on what it is that needs to be repaired. You know, do you need a clutch seal? Do you need a, you know, a sensor, or do you want them fully rebuilt properly so they're, you know, within like new specification of OE? We could do all that here. So again, you know, all of these units, I just, like, look at this one. This unit came in like this. Like the person took it apart and, well, that piece is no good anyway. Took it apart. I mean, all this stuff is pretty much trashed. And it was like, oh, I can't handle it. I'm just going to send it to us. And we'll we'll get it fixed. And I'm gonna, because this one is so far gone, I am gonna test this one in my car to be sure it's perfect. And then we have others here that came in, bag of parts, because of what they've seen online, and then they find, uh-oh, this may not be the issue, and then we get it. So look, with a lot of these, if they would have just shipped it to us, 800 bucks, and it's done and perfect, 800 bucks plus shipping. And now with all of this stuff, it's going to take me a bit more labor to figure out what it is that you screwed up. And it's been a lot of these lately. So please don't listen to people online that are not experienced with these on the cleaning, on the, tear it apart and blindly put these solenoids in there. They're always wrong. I try to find these posts online and I try to get in there and give accurate advice as to what could be going on, but I'm only human, I'm only one person. I can't find every thread everywhere and get in there and be like, no, that's not it, please don't do that. So I hope all of this makes sense. I hope you can see here that, look, I make money either way. If you take it apart and screw it up, chances are I'm gonna get your valve body anyway, either way. So, it's easier for everyone. If you suspect an issue with the valve body, contact me. I'll be able to tell you, yes, it's that valve body. No, it's not that valve body, it's this. And we can go in the right direction. And the headaches and the constant, removal and install of your transmission to figure it out, it's just not something you have to deal with. So I hope this video sheds a light on why I'm so adamant online on taking your valve body apart and cleaning it, and why that is a bad thing, and why you should never do that. I try to explain everything as accurately as I can with stuff like this, because at the end of the day, we support the do-it-yourselfer here. We want people to buy parts from us, and we want you to be successful in the repairs for your GR6. And if there's something complex going on that's a little over what is going to be a quick and simple repair, that you have confidence in sending us your parts for us to rebuild properly up to OE standards. So, we look at this here. If you're a do-it-yourselfer, please consider the fixed repair option. As we can see here, it's going to resolve your issue with the least amount of stress. If you decide to do the whole thing, as we discussed, that is just not the way to go. I know so many people online insist on this that do not have the experience that we do. They keep insisting this, don't do it. Stick with this. If you're going to do it yourself, we'll support you, we'll help you. And it's another thing I have to talk about here, and I hope this doesn't sound too unprofessional, but we offer free tech support. We support our people here. So when you email us and you give us logs and you tell us about the symptoms you're having, and we're like, yes, this is a part. And after we tell you, what's going on and give you the information, and you go off and buy the parts from somebody else, I have to be honest, you're a fucking asshole. Like that really sucks. Like we're here to support you. We're trying to do the best we can to give you a positive outcome to your situation, and then you just stab us in the back and buy parts from a competitor. It's so wrong in so many ways, and it really explains why this platform has so little support like this. Because, I don't know why, but a lot of people do this in this platform, and I think it turns off, support like this. If you're offering free support to people and they don't give you the business, why would you do it? And I don't blame people for thinking that way. So we push through it. At the end of the day, we benefit more off of giving you information and helping people than not. So, it's a good thing. But, if you don't have no intention of buying the parts from us, figure it out yourself. We put a lot of work into trying to figure this stuff out. You can do the same. Please just don't do that. It's not right. So I'd like to finish this video with a selector valve body, clutch valve body, and a new clutch I built for a couple of different customers. I put in a Franken mission. And if you have a complex issue, this is what you're going to get. from me. You know, if I put it in my car and test it, this is exactly what it's going to look like. So thanks for watching. We really appreciate the support and the business. See you next time. Hi, this is Jack at Jack's Trans. Today I'm testing two work orders. One is S25636 for Glenn. It's a 14 plate clutch upgrade that we completed, and another work order S25610. Let's see, this one is a main selector valve body rebuild and clutch valve body rebuild service. So I have a couple of transmissions I use for testing, and you know, this transmission has basically two work orders worth of parts installed to try to knock things out as quickly as possible. As you can imagine, to tear a GR6 down, you know, put valve bodies, clutches and stuff in it, and put it back together, then put it in a car is pretty time consuming. So, but you're paying a lot of money for these services. We want to make sure everything's absolutely perfect before it ships. So every once in a while I'll knock out two work orders in one to try to get this done. I know the clutch customer has a Selector valve body that we're going through as well. I'll do a separate video of the Selector valve body. When I pull this Selector valve body and clutch valve body out, I'll put your Selector valve body in and do a separate video on that to show you it functions perfectly too. But you know, the platform's aging. It's a complex platform. You never know what you're going to find. So we feel the additional efforts here to put it in a car and test it to make sure everything is absolutely perfect. So we're all confident that the parts that you're getting are, you know, flawless is the way to go. So the first test I like to do is what I call the clutch crossover test. So as we all know with the DCT, when you're in first gear, the odd clutch is engaged, but the even clutch is open with second gear pre-selected and ready to go. And when I'm using first, obviously the torque's going through the odd clutch since it's clamped into first gear. When I upshift from first to second, the odd clutch will let go of first, and then the even clutch will engage second. And then when the odd clutch is open and not used, it'll pull itself out of first and pre-select third and have it ready to go. So when I go and upshift from second to third, the even clutch will let go of second, and then the odd clutch will engage third. So this is called a clutch crossover. So as you can imagine, the timing needs to be perfect. The you know, the pressures need to be perfect. Clutch stack height, friction coefficient of the frictions, all that stuff. Clutch solenoids, everything has to be perfect for this timing to be right and for it to function properly. So with the tune I have on this car, I have like the torque table set really low, so the transmission has to work a lot harder to maintain pressures, you know, for the unit to function properly. So if we have a weak clutch solenoid, weak line pressure, or the clutch has a pressure leak at one of the seals or something, I'll feel it in this car where you may not feel it in your car. Since this car is taxing the system to make it work harder to achieve target, it's going to show me any irregularities with anything involving these valve bodies. So just keep that in mind, that this car is set up to intentionally aggravate the transmission. So on the clutch crossover test, what I'm doing is I'm checking for balance. I'm going to check to make sure, you know, the engagement on the even clutch feels the same as the engagement on the odd. I'm also checking for like flare, any kind of bucking, you know, anything that feels off from one clutch to another. So, you know, if there is an issue, it'll tell me either the clutch valve body is not correct or the, you know, the clutch itself isn't correct. If we look here, when we're in gear, we're already at almost 200 F, and line pressure is absolutely perfect on this one. So you may or may not know this, but with these clutch valve bodies, I take the solenoids apart and I redo the springs in them to increase line pressure, so you have better line pressure at idle and all through the rev range. It just works so much better. So as you can see here, that's what we did. So I'm going to go ahead and go full throttle. 1, 2, 3. So unfortunately there's a bit of traffic. I don't want to upset anybody, but you know, that felt really nice. The clutch engagement was quick, but it wasn't too aggressive. You know, I didn't feel any loss of traction or anything there. It was nice and smooth engagement, and it felt balanced. It felt the same going from first to second as it did going second to third. And the way I set up these clutches is I have like a little damper in them to help with like harmonic generation and a more balanced clutch engagement. So on most aftermarket clutches, when you go from first to second, it may feel a little harsh, but then when you go from second to third, you'll feel a bit of a delay, and then bump, it you know, bumps you into third during that crossover. And this clutch doesn't do that with the way we set them up. We set them up to be, you know, very well balanced and just a really nice daily driver. I mean, this clutch will hold a ton of power with the carbon seals and everything it has. You could crank the clutch pressures up to over 20 bar, it won't care. And clutch pressure, you know, with its torque capability is linear. So, you know, the higher you go with the pressure, the higher its torque capability goes too. So, you know, we'll just do some normal driving here. That's 2, 3, or 1, 2, 2, 3. It's really nice. It feels great. So it tells me the clutch valve body and the clutch are absolutely perfect, on point. Everything is working exactly like it should. Shifting through the gears here, I'm in 6 now. The selector valve body is doing everything exactly right. You know, there's no issue here at all. So truth be told, I did put this trans in just before the weekend, and I drove the car home, ran a few errands on it through the weekend, and drove it to work here today. So I have a lot of time on this trans, on these 2 valve bodies and this clutch. And I got to tell you, everything is just absolutely perfect. It couldn't have been a better result. It feels, you know, like I say, it's just absolutely on point. So another thing I like to mention with this clutch is we put a lot of effort into refining these clutches so they don't create what's called a harmonic on the 2-3 shift or accelerating in first gear. So a lot of aftermarket clutches, when you're sitting in first like this at a stop sign, you go to accelerate, you'll hear like a ooh noise come out of it. And it's the same when you shift from 2 to 3. The 2-3 shift, when you're under moderate throttle and you get around 4,000 to 5,000 RPM, you know, shifting from 2-3, so get it up here. Most aftermarket clutches, you'll hear a little bit of a oop there, like you know, a harmonic generation in the clutch. It's just a flaw in the design of the clutch, or the way the baskets are set up. It's basically a harmonic generator. And we fine-tune these clutches so well that under any circumstance, it'll never make that noise. It'll never create that harmonic. The harmonic is damaging to baskets, is damaging to bearings in the trans, especially on the odd side input shaft. And it's also an annoyance for the driver. But this clutch will handle, you know, more power. It's smooth, it's balanced, and it doesn't make a bunch of noise. It's just, I'm just really happy with the result of this. The reason I had this car, you know, this trans in over the weekend is I knew that, you know, this clutch was going to be one that makes it a real nice daily driver. So, yeah, it's just been a pleasure to drive on it. So yeah, it's real nice. So when the load built up there, and I was at the top end of third, well, not the top end of third, but, you know, I got into kind of the mid-range where torque spikes on this car. Went into fourth, you know, the engagement on fourth with the torque table going up as I'm accelerating there. Hitting fourth was firm and, you know, very quick. It's really nice. Like it just came out absolutely perfect. So, so that's about it. So, because I've spent so much time with this trans, I already did what's called a thermal test. So with the valve bodies, I also like to do, you know, what we call a thermal test. So with the sensors in these valve bodies, especially the pressure sensors, but you also have position sensors, speed sensors, all of that stuff. You know, that guy liked it. What'll happen is they age and they're getting to the point where they're going to fail fairly soon. They'll begin to drift the higher the fluid temp becomes. So you get over 180 F and the sensor will begin to drift out of range further and further and further. And the higher you get the temp, the more out of range the sensor gets, until the transmission limps out and you get either a failure with the trans limping, or the behavior of the trans will change. Like I said, I have this car set up to aggravate the trans and tax it to work it hard. So I feel nothing. I'm at 206 now for fluid temp, and everything feels absolutely on point. That just tells me, and I haven't had any errors yet. So that just tells me that the sensors are staying on target. They're not drifting. Everything is good there. So, we do have bench test stations that have vibration. Fluid is heated up. They'll run under pressure and everything. They'll pass all those tests. They'll put it in the car and they'll drift. There's no better way of testing sensors than to have them in the car under real world conditions. The load, the vibrations, everything, they love to be aggravated in the car over the test station. So that's about it. So, customer of the 2 valve bodies and customer of the clutch, I hope this video helps and gives you confidence in these parts. What I'm going to do is I'm going to remove them straight out of trans, put them in a bag, and ship them to you. On the clutch valve body, I'm going to pull the pressure sensors out of the clutch valve body and have them in a different bag. You got to put them back in. Please be real gentle with them. Keeping the pressure sensors on the valve body when I ship it, they always get broken. It's just the way they stick out, they break every time. So I'm going to pull them out, have them in a separate bag, just put the pressure sensors in, put the valve bodies straight in your car on both valve bodies, and it's the same with the clutch. Just take it out of the bag, put it straight in your car. As you can see, it's good to go. Please don't tamper with it. As you can see, it's perfect. There's no reason to touch anything. Everything works as it should. These parts are they're perfect. So we really appreciate the business. Thanks very much. We appreciate the trust, and thanks again.